So began the invasion of Iraq. And as soon as the war started, of course, I looked around, and then as soon as the war started, wait, no, right, I built some watchtowers first. My bad. I just wanted to see what the Iraqi positions looked like. And as soon as the war started, I realized there was nothing there. So I I can only describe what happened afterwards as a absolute massacre. But the Iraqis did concentrate about 5,000 soldiers near Baghdad, and so I didn't want to advance over there. And instead, I advanced everywhere around except for that one province. So then, after they attacked with those troops, I was like, okay, they have nothing now, and so I just invaded. And all I needed was just like about half the country to take over, right? I mean, no, and to not to take over, as in like what do you call? For the like territories that I needed. I just needed half the country. And I pondered just taking this bit right here and just like going home with it, right? Just relax, like just ending the war. But then I was like, you know what? Nah. And then I was like, you know what? Let's just finish this and let's just completely conquer Iraq, cause why not? Cause you know at this point, why like it's not too much of a hassle to do so. So then I started conquering the Iraqi parts of like Saudi Arabia and stuff, and that parts. And I just basically went and like Iraq had built itself a whole empire, but I was just taking it back. And then also I decided to just right on the side, like right as I was invading Iraq, just invade Kuwait too. And then I even like I continued, and then the Iraqi territories in Oman I started reaching as well. And then meanwhile Kuwait, I just annexed the whole thing. Like thing is, I don't need Kuwait City, so my plan was to like see. Thing is, the reason I annexed it is because it has a really good population. So then, like, I realized that I could just take advantage of that population later on, and then just recruit from there, right? So anyway, which I do later. Anyways, yeah, and then Oman declares war on me too, and so I have to invade both Oman and the Iraqi territories, and I'm just like, okay. And now I've just been advancing all the way since Iraq, so yeah. And then now that I realize Iraq is finally gone, 100% victory, I take the territories I want, right? And then I decide to just give everything else to the UAE, because I do this thing where like I just strengthen my vassals by giving them more territory. And in this case, I was just doing that too, and like and also it made a really good buffer state for me come to like the rest of the Middle East, and so I wouldn't have to worry about it ever again. And so I was even planning on trading provinces later on. And then same thing with Oman. I called UAE into the war and then just gave them the territory. So now UAE was pretty much just like they were just taking care of the Middle East for me, pretty much. Like because I didn't want to be bothered with assimilating all of that territory. Like there's no point. There's no point because I'm just gonna let it go anyways. So why not? Right? Meanwhile, I decided to pull back all my troops, just evacuate them. The UAE just got this from here. They just manage the territories. Meanwhile, I assimilated the provinces in Iraq. And Iraq, trust me guys, Iraq would make a really good, like, what do you call it, recruiting ground later on. Because they actually have a really decent population here. Because even though you can't see it, the Tigris and Euphrates rivers, they make really good fertile plains, you could say. That's where population is mostly concentrated. So yeah. And then after that invasion, I decided to finish off with my Middle Eastern conquests by invading Turkey. And see, I've reached the stage in the empire where like I can just recruit whatever I want. Like I can just recruit any amount of like soldiers I want for any war, and then I can do it because I just have so much money. And that's the point I've come to. And so like what I did, I started recruiting from Iran, okay, because like Iraq was not assimilated yet properly. And if you look to the like bottom over there, Kuwait, look at that population, absolute madness. I mean, not madness, just like 73,000 people just packed in there. So yeah, you can use that later on, right? So I started lining up the Turkish border with like just I think I like look. Normally, I have a standard amount of people. What I do, right, when I line up the borders by like troops per province. So like I will line up say 5,000 troops per every province of border that I have. And in this case, since I had just so much money, I decided to go with 10,000 per province against Turkey. And I know this is almost like it's overkill. Like it really is. It really was overkill. But then like come on, let's be real. The entirety of the Mongol Empire's history is overkill. So like yeah, is it that is it, you could just say I'm being historically accurate, you know what I'm saying? Okay. Meanwhile, over in Asia, I forgot to mention Asia. I got Japan to attack India mainly because here's the thing. My game plan in Asia was just to prevent India from ever like in India or China from ever dominating. That's literally it. That's the main game plan. And the thing is, those the AI did it perfectly for me by just like continuously fighting throughout these like all these turns. They've literally just been continuously fighting. Like they haven't stopped since like all the way in the early on. So yeah. Meanwhile, I started my invasion of Turkey, and of course it's went as well as you'd expect. They'd even taken part of northern Syria, so I guess you can call that foreshadowing. And wait, oh yeah, that's yeah, it's a little closer to real life than we all realize. Anyways, I started pushing on, and I even started keeping troops on the coast because the AI was showing like a likelihood of naval invading. And at this point, I didn't even like worry too much about keeping my lines like organized and straight like I normally do. I was just sending him in because I realized I was like I don't need to worry. And I even like I don't usually do this naval invasions, but I even sent our people around all the way to the other side of Turkey, just for the naval invasion. And then I continued the land invasion from over here, and like keep in mind I still had plentiful troops, so I was looking good. Again, it was just a massacre. Again, listen, I'm keeping in line with the Mongolian, like the Mongol Empire thing, bro. It's like conquering people, way not way bigger, but like you know what I mean. Anyways, I literally just went and straight up conquered all of Anatolia right then and there, right? And so what I decided to do was I decided to instead just annex the whole thing. No, oh yeah, right, my bad. I released Syria, right? And then I annexed the whole rest of it. I do this manually. I could have just tapped on Turkey, like the flag, but whatever. So I annexed the whole thing, right? And then yeah, I annexed the rest coast as well. They get parts of Syria for some reason. I don't know why. I think it's because like they took their own score points. I don't know what though, but whatever, right? So that piece still happened. Favorable for me still. And then I even gave Syria one more province because I didn't need it. It didn't require me. And then what I did, that's very interesting. You see, I realized the Byzantine Empire had popped back up, and so I was like, you know what? This might be kind of cool thing to do, but like. I annexed them, right? So then I could puppet them again. And see, I realized that they were, for some reason, a democratic government. So I tried to go into civilizations and try to find the monarchist one. But then, of course, I didn't find anything. So I just went back to, like, democratic. And then I released them. So I re-released them now. And then I proceeded to give them territory that I didn't need. That was Turkey's. Because I wanted to, again, do the same thing I did with, like, my previous vassals, and, like, just use them as buffer states. That's what I do with vassals, like, most of the time. Because I'll tell you one thing, vassals are just, like, an extra border. They really are. They're just, like, a border that's even better. Because the AI, right, if the AI is out, say, like, Bulgaria or Romania ever went to war with me, they won't go through the Byzantine Empire. They won't do that. So then it's like an even better border when it comes to vassals. So then like that's why I usually like doing this so much. So yeah. So now I'd created the Byzantine Empire, and the awkward thing was they were still weaker than like what, Bulgaria, I think. I mean mainly because they were just newly formed. So it makes sense. Anyways, I organized all my troops and then sent them over to Bulgaria, the Bulgarian territories in the Caucasus, because I remembered those existed. So then, sure enough, I prepared to invade. Meanwhile, I sent like 17,000 troops all the way to the border with Bulgaria that like the Byzantines had. And so yeah, I was preparing for the invasion of Bulgaria, and like I also spent the next couple of turns assimilating the massive swath of territory that I had just taken, and yeah, so that's that. And then I tried to just threaten annexation with all of Bulgaria, and then they just accepted. So all that like preparation for nothing. And then I decided to just give all of Bulgaria to the Byzantines. So so because again, I was trying to strengthen. I'm trying to strengthen my vassals, make them stronger. Because I'll tell you one thing: stronger vassals, if they can like fight for themselves in general, it's good for you because then you don't have to do the fighting. You can just like let them fight. They can fight for you, not for you, but like they can fight their own battles. So you don't have to like rush in to help them out. Because it's really annoying when you have a vassal and then like they're just like their economy is shit or something, and then they just like can't fight back against like enemies. So yeah. Anyways, looking over at Indonesia, yeah, there was a whole ass war going down there. Meanwhile, India and China were still in their grinding war, and Ukraine and Russia were now at war. So, this game is just a game. It's definitely not realistic. Anyways, noticing the chaos that was going on in Eastern Europe, I was like, hey, you know what? Russia's gonna be free real estate. And so I started organizing I started organizing my armies all along the Russian border, which by the way at this point was just absolutely massive border with Russia, by the way. And yeah, so I started recruiting from all over the place, and this just shows how massive the border is. It's like this war would be kind of big. And then instead, like, I didn't go for like 10,000 troops per province this time, because again there's just simply so many provinces to cover. So I decided to just go with about 2,000 people per province, around that much. So yeah, I don't go too far, but then like still, considering how wide the front is, it's not necessary to have that many people per province either, because the AI is usually pretty split up. So also, Central Asia makes a really good recruiting ground. Anyways, I got concerned. Like, I was looking over at Asia, and like Myanmar was getting way too close to like taking China out in Manchuria, which was where China was surviving. And so I decided to get India to go to war with Myanmar, so that like, again, I explained this, but I even gave money to China. I'm supposed to conquer them, but I gave money to them. There's the same situation that was like with Prussia in the German Confederation video. But like, strangely enough, in a strange twist of events, I was trying to keep them alive so that I could like conquer them later. It's weird, but yeah, it sounds weird. Let's be real, it sounds weird, but yeah, that's what it was. Okay, so meanwhile, I was looking over at Europe. I was trying to see exactly what was going on. Like, this is just a fucking like insanity in Eastern Europe, and like, I got Moldova to declare war on Russia because I didn't want Ukraine falling. In just like, I doubt they would have, but I was just preventative measure, right? Sort of like how I was like, again, about Asia, right? Like the game plan in Asia was just to cause so much instability. When I came around, it would be no problem taking it. So yeah. Anyways, I started my invasion of Russia. Okay, I should probably narrate more on the point. But I started invading from both the Caucasus. Okay, the main direction was the Caucasus, right? Because I'll be honest, the Caucasus was like the closest and most valuable, territories that were near my border. They were the most valuable territories that I could reach as like quickly. So I realized that if I could take out the Caucasus, that's a major part of Russia's population right then and there. Like, sure, these Siberian lands are there, but like the Caucasus itself contains maybe like twice as much more people than all that. So yeah. And then so I started advancing as quick as possible. But I tried to keep my lines stable, or because again, Russia, I'll tell you one thing. Russia in this game, like you can easily just like spread your forces way too thin in Russia. I'm telling you. So, like I mean, Russia's the main. I mean, that happened in real life too. Like real life history, that's what happened. The forces just got stretched to the limit, right? So you want to prevent that from happening while you're playing. So then that's why I usually work to try keep my lines in order. And so now, as you can see, as you're pretty sure watching, the Caucasus and my forces met up finally. So now the front line was actually getting shorter the further, So I actually shortened the front line, which is good. It's beneficial. And yeah, so then I started pushing all along this. What's the name of the river? Volga. Yeah, if I'm not wrong, it's the Volga River. And then of course I started pushing all the way into Siberia as well. And man, like there's so many. I was lucky since I'm a big nation. I have like all these movement points. Bro, if I was just like some tiny country or something, well, it would take like so long to just move all of these troops, right? And so, yeah, Russians tried to counterattack here and there, but honestly, they didn't work. And the thing was, I realized that like the troops in the Caucasus were very concentrated, and so I didn't want to invade. I didn't want to like what do you call it? Spread the. But then the northern troops, right? The Caucasus troops are concentrated, but the northern troops are spread out. So I mean, you guys will see this more later on in this war. But what I do is I start like, as the line continues moving, right? I start gradually like shifting bit by bit, like forces from the Caucasus up north, further up north, so that like it can support the fight. Those troops can support the fight. Then since they're more useful up north than in south. You'll see that in a while. Okay. Meanwhile, in the Far East, I was, of course, just going nuts, just taking as much as I could. Because honestly, I had a feeling that the AI would not let me annex all of Russia, right? That never happens in this game. Like, you will never get to annex all of Russia in a peace deal. This just never happens. Okay? Unless you were really overpowered beforehand. Okay? It never happens. So then, now, while I was looking at Russia, I realized the time to invade, I really chose the perfect time to invade because they were still like halfway through Ukraine. And then now Ukraine was pushing back against them because because of my invasion, and like not because of that, like, they were just completely distracted over there, So it was working in my favor a lot. I could have probably invaded them without the distraction as well, but I mean the distraction definitely helped. I'll say that. I'll say that much, right? So yeah, I continued to just continuously advance into Siberia. I was making it ever more closer to Vladivostok. Meanwhile, also what's that called? Sakhalin is the island. I know that. And then what's that peninsula called? Kamchatka, right? Yeah, I think it's called Kamchatka Peninsula. I think so. Yeah, okay. Meanwhile, okay, I look back at Asia and I realize, okay, yeah, India is still dominating this war. Myanmar still controls Manchukuo, and China is almost about to die, but I still didn't do anything. I left it all on its own. And like, look, if you guys look at the Mongol Empire right now, it's pretty massive, as you can see. Like, it looks massive on paper, like on the map at least. But if you like, thing is though, it's not really that like impressive considering the Siberian provinces are massive. So then it makes it look bigger. It mainly just makes it look better. But then because I still had not completely taken the heartland of Russia. And see, as you can see right now, I start shifting troops. I start like trying to shift troops upward. Right? Like you'll see me. That's what I do most of the time. Like you gotta. I mean, of course, I'm pretty sure it's generally done by people in general. But like, you start like shifting troops when you're running thin on some places, right? That's what I start doing over here, and in this area, because I realized that like the northern push, if I fail the northern push, then that will just result in the Russians taking back a bunch of territory. And while that loss won't be too bad for me, it's just gonna take more time. It's just gonna waste time. So anyways, Luckily, I felt that my lines were a little bit stronger, and but the Russians still, like, they were actually coming pretty close to pushing back. But I made it. I tried as best as I could to, like, advance, especially in the northern, like, it's not okay. It's not Karelia. That's not Karelia. But like the northern, I don't know what it's called. I don't know what the place is called. But yeah, there's no, the northern regions, right? Russia was actually, like, beating me back pretty well, or not pretty well, but how do I say this? How do I say this? They were pushing me back in some areas to the point where, like, I now had some empty gaps in the lines. Meanwhile, in the north, the northern north, nah, bro, they weren't, like, stopping me for shit, because, like, there was nothing there. It's just ice, guys. All right. Meanwhile, yeah. So now, luckily, things were moving, like, in my trajectory now, because, like, the north was gonna be fine. Like, I felt, because here's the thing, right? As the southern advance continued to press on, uh, what do you call? This thing. The front line was getting smaller and smaller every time, and so when that happens, I mean, in this game, it's typically just like, I mean, look, I don't know. Does it favor the people with less or more, less troops or more troops, like smaller front lines? But I think in general, it favors people with more troops in this game, because in this game, it's based off of, like, how many troops you can bring to the fight, and so then the more narrow the, what do you call, fighting ground, the better it is for you. As you can see, like, yeah, yeah, okay, so, okay. Anyways, as you can see in the northern push, right, I'm pretty sure you guys saw, just, like, if you're looking, the troops are being reduced to the hundreds, and so that's what I'm saying, like, in Russia, in this game, like, you can easily just be overstretched, and this is just clear proof of that. Like, you saw how many people I put on the front lines, and, like, now look, it's just you can easily be overstretched. Yeah, that's the point, right? That's my point I'm trying to make. So yeah, meanwhile, so as I finished off the last of European Russia, I also sent troops to Sakhalin, made them take, and then I also sent troops to, like, the what do you call? Well, they're called the Kuril Islands rather than, like, the Russian Kuril, right? Russian Kuril, yeah, it's just Kuril Islands, right? These islands are disputed by Japan too, by the way, in real life, which they're still controlled by Russia, but then, like, Japan says it's theirs, and, like, it's a whole ass debate and everything. So yeah. Anyways, so yeah, I even took over, like, the Russian territories in, like, Latvia, right? Yeah, Latvia, and so now I finally made the peace deal. However, it didn't allow me to completely take everything, so I decided to, take these last provinces. And then I even decided to just take Kaliningrad as well, just so I can complete, like, practically 100%. Of course, there were the islands up to the Arctic, but, like, let's be real, I can't be asked. Anyways, I looked at, like, where the European border was, and, like, because there's so many provinces, right? It's easy for me to make mistakes, and, like, of course, I wasn't getting 100%. Again, like, I told you guys, you can't really get 100% of Russia all the time, or ever. Like, it's really rare. So I tried my best to, like, make the most non-border gory borders, like, non-border gore borders. And the thing was, I didn't want to go through the island hopping again, and I thought Sakhalin was a part of the required territories. And then after checking, I realized that it's not at all needed. And I was like, ah, shit, well, that was a waste. Meanwhile, in Asia, China had retaken Manchukuo. Myanmar was now, like, occupying mainland China and, like, contesting India over it. It was just chaos, let's be real. I still was not going to get involved whatsoever in that region, because I was, again, I was gonna focus on Europe, right? And so, meanwhile, I spent the next couple of turns just assimilating the absolute massive swath of land that I had accumulated from this, like, Russian war. And of course, just because there's just so much provinces to do that, or to do, right? So yeah, all that. And the thing, and the craziest thing is, I still have to invade Russia again, like, later on, because I have not gotten everything. So really puts it into perspective. Anyways, yeah, so I just kept annexing stuff. Not annexing, man. Assimilating. Wrong words. Right. So then, yeah, I just okay. Yeah, that's mainly that's what I was doing. That's just what I was doing. So, anyways, once I was done assimilating, I looked over and I decided that, like, you know what, the next target shall be Ukraine, because, like, honestly, Ukraine was the next biggest territorial conquest I needed in Europe, right? So I looked over what they were doing. They were still at war with Russia, so they were taking a bunch of Russian provinces. I didn't want them to invade Russia because, again, gotta keep the enemies divided. But, like, yeah, and so I started piling up troops on the Ukrainian border. Getting the ones in St. Petersburg, getting the one, like, I started, like, rallying the ones around, mainly the ones that were just around Russia, just, like, chilling after the war. And of course, I got hit by a plague. So yeah, no, screw that. No, because thing is, whenever there's a plague, right, the AI always, like, said, the game always says, like, stability, province stability is low, and, like, that makes sense. But at the same time, you think it's like that you haven't assimilated, and that's kind of annoying. Anyways, I started preparing for the war with Ukraine, and so, as you can see right here, Iraq. I said earlier in the video it's gonna be an amazing recruiting ground, and it is, because there's just so much people here. So I started just recruit, like, I started organizing them into people once again into, like, 10, 11, 12,000 per like, unit. I just started organizing the armies, and, like, in Iraq, and then I just sent them over to the front line in Ukraine in preparation for the war. And so, as soon as I moved the last troops in place, I prepared for the eventual war that would basically solidify my control over Eastern Europe, per se, and basically bring and the second biggest in my European conquests. See you guys next time. Bye bye.